All right, welcome to Advanced Female Character Design with the Redbeard. Me, Matt Thorpe, wiggity wiggity whack. Okay, so I wanted to get this tutorial started with kind of talking about the things that I take into consideration when approaching a female character, and also do a quick recap over the character design principles that I taught in my previous tutorials. So if you don't have my previous tutorials, that's fine. I'll do a quick recap, kind of talking about the character design principles that I use for all my characters, and then I'll dive into the things that I start to care about when creating a female character. So let's go ahead. Let's just jump right into this. Yeehaw. So the recap. So if you don't have, so what I taught in my first couple of character design courses was just some fundamental things that helped guide and direct you when you're working in your characters in 3D. Some core fundamentals. Some of the fundamentals of character design. I'll go over this really quickly. I go over this in a lot more depth and go into a little bit more reasoning of why I care about this as well in the other tutorials. But just as a recap and a refresher, the first thing that I go into is just understanding what makes up an appealing character. There's certain core things. First off, the things that make up an appealing character, and this doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good-looking character or that they're, very handsome or attractive or sexy. It's actually more of a core makeup of things. And I talk about this a lot in the face because the face draws a lot of interest and a lot of attention because of the detail that resides there. But the core principles of this is making something that is relatable. If you include these things, your audience, people that you show it to, will instantly have a connection to them because this is just things found in nature. This is things that all people have, more or less. And what the thing that I'm talking about are these facial planes here. And this is something that Leonardo da Vinci was studying when he was studying these cadavers, that all these people and faces had more or less the same simplified makeup of them. And if you include these into your character designs, that appeal is naturally there because it's something that is recognizable and relatable. But if you miss these things, your character may start to look weird and funny, and you're not going to be able to tell why until, you most likely won't know why, but it's most likely because you're missing one of these core landmarks pretty much. And what I'm talking about is just this, more or less, this forehead plane, the nose bridge plane, I call this the facial mask plane, which these don't have technical terms for them. These are just things that I'm making up. So the facial mask plane, which kind of crosses the cheekbones all the way down to the mouth, the chin plane, and then the jawbone plane, which is here. And if you have these core things, then your audience will instantly have some relatability to them. The next thing that I focus on is shape language. This is a very core fundamental of character design, are using 3 simple shapes: the square, the triangle, and the circle. And each of these shapes has a different message, and they say different things without even explaining to people. People just understand this. When you look at a square, it's very firm, it's very strong, it's very immovable, stubborn. A triangle is a lot more active. It's a little bit more adventurous, athletic. It can be very sinister, very evil. And then you look at the circle, and circle is very, soft. It's smooth. It's funny. It's kind of this comic relief. It rolls with the changing tide, pretty much. So that's, the simple breakdown of some character design principles. And I want to show some quick examples of these as well, of these shapes in use. And Pixar does this probably better than anyone else, is using these core simple shapes. When you look at Sully, I mean, he is a big square, right? From the top, he's just a big block. He's very strong. He's very bold. You know, he's very determined. And then also you look at his opposite, his counterpart, which is Mike Wazowski, which is just a big ball. And he is the comic relief, obviously. And that was all on purpose, using a square and a ball for this. They'd use these in a lot of their movies. Like Up is a great representation of character, of shape language, to define who that character is. Also, in Ratatouille, and Anton Ego, he is just a big triangle, like an upside down triangle. He's got very sharp edges. Everything about him says a little bit of these sinister qualities to him, from, you know, the tops of his shoulders down to the bottom of his shoes. They're all very pointy, to convey that this guy is heartless. He's evil, you know. Anyways, so those are some examples. And then they even use that with the fishes. Like Dory is a big circle, you know, when you turn her to her sides. Her eyes are really big circular things because she's the comic relief. Anyways, a little bit more about that. So the things that I go into when building a female character, this will be the new stuff that I'm introducing, is first you need to understand the differences between men and women when designing and building a female character. So let's talk about that for a second. So I just did these drawings really rough, so excuse the proportions are off, but more or less I wanted to show the main things. You know, when you look at the male character, oftentimes, especially the hero is a lot more athletic. You know, is very straight up and down. There's not a ton of curves to him. You know, the chest tapers in a little bit and then tapers out just a little bit. So you'll see that like the chest is always going to be wider than the hips. You know, there's very, very little curves. Everything's a little bit bolder. You see a lot more angles. You know, there's not this. The shapes are a lot simpler and they're a lot more harsh edges when designing a male character. You also see that the head sizes may differ. Like the female head may be a little bit bigger than the male head. When you look at proportional things, like you may have a male that has, you know, that's 7 heads high, and then you'll have the same, in that same world, a female that is 6 heads high. You know, things like that, just subtle things that will separate them. The female obviously is a lot more curvy. The chest area is normally the same width as the hips, and you get a lot more hourglass shape out of them. The edges are a lot more smooth, or a lot more curvy, and they flow a lot better. So those are the things that you want to keep in mind, that you want to have a lot of smooth transitions, not a lot of angular shapes, unless you're doing a little bit more harsh of a character, like a witch or something that is evil. You might want to pull in a little bit more of like angularity to some of her muscle shapes. And that's basically the core difference, is finding that the female is a lot softer, the males normally are a lot more harsh. And when you keep that into consideration, and then keeping these principles of like the shoulder to hip ratio is normally the same, when you get a lot more taper and the shoulders are a lot broader with the male. So the next thing that I recommend is to take time to understand muscle anatomy. You know, go in, there's a lot of great resources online. Go in and understand what a realistic muscle anatomy for a female looks like. There's some great references. Some of the resources that I've used quite a bit. Anatomy for Sculptors, which is anatomynext.com. I have their Anatomy for Sculptors PDF book that I use all the time. It's always up. I'm always using reference for it. So, you know, I don't know every muscle, every bone, everything by heart. I don't, and I doubt that I ever will. I put time and effort to knowing these things, but honestly, I want to know them. I want to know what they look like and know how they flow more than anything else. Anatomy Tools is great. In Proko, they have a great free series of videos on how to draw different, how to draw the human anatomy, and they're just incredibly great. So I highly recommend some of these things. So make sure that before you start, that you have lots of references, lots of knowledge in these areas. They will help you relate your character to your audience. And now I want to talk about, understanding these things. You want to have, it's just like the facial planes I talked about earlier. You want to have for your body landmarks. And these are core things that, human anatomy has. Not even just human anatomy, but even like stylized ogres and things have. You want to have these core landmarks to show that, there is muscle behind this skin. There's bones under that muscle, and there's things. If you do these little hints of real anatomy to your stylized characters or any character that you're making, they'll send a message to your audience without them even knowing it, and that's more about the appeal of finding that appeal. So let's talk a little bit about what these landmarks are. So when you look at the front, and this is the same for male and female characters. We're not going to talk a little bit about the female character because that's what we're doing. That's why we're here. So this is just a quick sketch that I did. I just basically traced over a human girl that I'm using for reference. But this, I wanted to use this to showcase like the landmarks for the female. So in the front, you have your collarbone, the hint of the collarbone that goes across. You also have the sternum. That's, going to be more of a flat area right here where the two muscles are kind of going in. Also the top of the ribs. And the ribs right here will also be one of the landmarks. So you have your sternum, your collarbone, and then your ribs. You also have your pelvic bone is part of one of the landmarks, but it's actually just the front, or I believe it's called the asis of the collarbone, or not the collarbone, the pelvic bone. And it's just like a little bone kind of protruding here, and then you kind of see a transition between muscle and bone, which we'll just, put here. And that goes all, wraps all the way around that iliac crest from the pelvic bone, which is the top. Like if your pelvic bone looks kind of like a weird looking butterfly. This is the pelvic bone. Excuse the horrible anatomy or whatever. But it's going to be like this top. So this is all connected here. It's that top crest right here that wraps around. So the front of it, you can see that bone poking out just a little bit, that asis bone. And then, of course, the other landmarks that you want to have are your belly button, nipples, and then every joint is also going to be a landmark. So you have your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, all landmarks, knee, ankles. These are all landmarks that you want to keep in mind when you want to have some of these. For the back, there are also some landmarks. You've got your elbows, shoulders, wrists, back of knee. And then you're going to kind of showcase the spine where it sinks in. Like if this was 3D, everything would kind of pull in a little bit. You also have the outline of the shoulder blades where it goes up to almost meet the clavicle and kind of wraps around. But you have an idea of the shoulder blades, and then this is where the back of the pelvic bone meets, which is the piscis, I can't remember how to pronounce it. But anyways, the back of the pelvic bone right here, and normally there are two little dimples if you're doing a skinny character, right in the back, more or less. It also kind of forms a upside down triangle right there between these muscles. And that's about it for the landmarks for the back. You know, you can have a couple of the bigger bones from the spine right there, poking out. But then again, it's all, these are just things to keep in mind when you're designing your character, because all these things are just going to help you when you're making a character in 3D, especially a stylized character. So I want to talk about this a little bit. Design versus stylized. So with having all that information that we have about the anatomy, the landmarks, this can help us give us a full understanding of what the female has, you know, these things. And what we want to do is design our muscles and our body around this knowledge instead of stylizing it. There's a lot of, you know, different artists out there that will just stylize every muscle, and by giving everything its shape and, oh yeah, this is how it is. But what we want to do is actually just design and do with one curve or a couple of curves to suggest those things, those muscles, those groups, instead of stylizing each individual part. We want to have design into what we are doing, so we don't have to define every area of every muscle, every separation. You want to have that design language speak across your characters. There's some great examples on the internet if you want to check these people out, who are some of my favorite 3D artists. First is Andrew Hickenbottom. Is just an incredibly talented artist, and he designs a bunch of different pinups, and he just has a beautiful way of simplifying anatomy. The same with Dylan Eckern, who's a artist at Disney Animation, Disney Feature. He is an incredible 3D artist, and he has such a great knowledge of 2D design and 3D design that he can simplify anatomy and have everything read across perfectly. And then another artist is just incredibly talented, who is a lead character artist over Overwatch, Renaud Galland, who is just the whole design spectrum across the Overwatch characters is just so beautiful. They have so much design language across them, but they really do a great job of simplifying this anatomy to design it and not just stylize it. Anyways, and the last thing that I focus on when making a 3D character is rhythm and flow. So there's a couple things I want to talk about with rhythm and flow. What you want to have is a lot of rhythm and flow, like it's just going from one thing to the next and connecting with this great rhythm. You want to have balance, where you have a really beautiful S curve mixed with not a straight, never do like complete straights, but maybe a settle curve. And then you want to have areas of relief and areas of interest as well. And what I mean when I say areas of relief versus areas of interest is, like, if we look at the profile of a head, you want to have a nice kind of flow down to the nose, to the, something that flows to the lips, and all the interest is right here in the front. And now, if I went to the back of the head, that's where I have my relief. It's just a simple shape all the way down, even to the back, This is a horrible drawing. Anyways, so all my interest is up here, and then opposite that is my relief that I have right there. And the same with the body. You want to have, let's do, maybe a front view of the body. So the head, you know, the hips, and doing the hips, you have a really nice curve down, and then opposite that. So I'll just do this really quick. I'm not worrying that it's going to be really messy. That's straight on the insides and curvier on the outsides, and you want to do that throughout throughout your figures. So curve, maybe it's subtly there, a high point where the muscles are, and then pull it out like this, but you have these subtle curves on the insides, but more extreme curves on the outsides. The arms, curves into the neck, to the chest, or to the back. Anyways, just some subtle things like that. Curved right from the wrist to the fingers. It's almost like they're flowing from the inside of the wrist to the out, and opposite like that. Anyways, these simple ideas of rhythm and flow, where everything just starts to connect without having much breaking, without having too many areas of interest. Like if I was going to do the inside of leg and it was really curvy, it kind of defeats the purpose of this curve. And you want to stay away from too many areas of interest. You want to make sure that you're having relief and having everything has a design purpose and a balance to it, which is your rhythm and flow. So finally, I want to break down the concept that, knowing those principles, I want to break down the concept that we'll be making today. Or making over this course. Now this concept actually, I wanted to do for this tutorial someone else's concept. And so one of my favorite artists and illustrators out there is Justin Rodriguez. And I had this idea for what I wanted to do. So I contacted him, and I paid him. I had this idea of the story of this really kind of harder, rougher girl that would race this futuristic motorcycle, this hover cycle. Her nickname would be Miss February, and she would just be this rough girl that's still beautiful, that she still has a sexiness to her, but she's not about that. She's more about just being hardcore and awesome. So, and I was really a lot inspired by the van girls, these girls that ride around on their motorcycles, and I was like, oh man, I would love a character like this. And so I talked to him, and I kind of explained the character that I wanted, and we kind of went together, and he made this beautiful concept piece out of it. So it was a great opportunity to be able to work off of one of my favorite artists' concepts that I commissioned from him. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to break down this sketch into simple shapes, so then I can translate that into 3D. But first I need to understand what I'm seeing here to its basic shape, so I can figure that out. So first I want to kind of understand what this chest is doing. So it's kind of back here, and let's actually do one of these. Let's lighten up that so we can sketch over it. Anyways, we have the chest shape that goes into the hip shape. try to find like the middle axes. So you can see where some tapering will go, where the flow of the torso will go. And then I can kind of see these shoulders here attaching to the collarbone, and where the rhythms are with this character. We've got our landmarks here, the chest, and then all the way down. And just really simple shapes, just to understand what kind of shapes I'm going to be using to rough the model out in the beginning. The neck's going to be thin. And then these legs, I'll find the core shapes of these legs. Knee landmark all the way down to the ankle. I've got to kind of understand where this other leg is going. I should probably have it up here or something. That one's not necessarily as important. But once I have, this, let's turn this up. Once I have my core shapes understood, I'm going to do a very quick, rough kind of T-pose sketch to see if I can, understand, just to give me a blueprint of what I'm going to go to. So I've got, the head that kind of looks like it might be, the head, give room for the neck, skinny waist, it almost looks like her hips are bigger than her where her shoulders are, which would be right here. And it looks like she's got a nice kind of gesture to the knee, but they're skinnier legs. I don't necessarily need this to be super accurate. Sometimes I do. I will draw more accurate T-pose if I don't think I understand what shapes I'm seeing. This one's pretty straightforward. It's a great concept, and it's really easy to understand. Upside down heart for chest, loose shirt. These arms more fairly skinny. The arm placement, this is where the belly button, that's where the elbow should be, is more or less the same distance. I want to do that. Have my wrists and then my hands. Again, I'm not worrying about any detail. I just want to make sure I'm kind of understand the proportions that I'm going to get into when I take this into ZBrush, then I have a fairly good understanding of what to do next. So now that I have this idea, let's jump into ZBrush. Yeehaw, and get her done.